Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Millennium TV News. This is Fahmed Islam with you. Before moving on, let's look at today's top stories. Awaiting a letter from Obama in Cuba. Merrick Garland is a fine man, says Sanriel. Kerry says Islamic State's atrocities genocide. Racing for the night on the Greek border. High hopes in Havana ahead of Obama visit. Well, those were the headlines. Now the details. A letter from Obama is making its way to a 76-year-old letter writer in Cuba via direct mail for the first time in 50 years. Ileana Yorza awaits a special delivery in Havana, a letter from U.S. President Barack Obama. It's part of the first batch of U.S. direct mail to Cuba. She says, "No, I did not expect it because I am a humble person, a humble personality. I wrote him with all my heart, but I know he is the president of the most powerful country in the world. I know well the history of bilateral relations, right? Impossible to think that he would agree to this. I did not expect it." She hopes to have coffee with the president, who is due to arrive in Cuba Sunday. Cuban citizen Ileana Yorza says, "But in my last letter, I said how many ladies my age who have nothing to do with anything, who have already retired, have invited you to their home to drink a coffee? I do not think there are many. I'm sure many people have written to him, but come on, to come and have coffee, make me that gift. I think that I put that in my last letter." She still hopes the U.S. economic embargo on Cuba will finally end. While direct mail service between the U.S. and Cuba had been suspended since 1963, mail still managed to flow between the nations. Now there is hope in Havana of more openings to come. Senate Democrats urge their Republican counterparts to do your job and hold confirmation hearings on President Obama's Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland.
Merrick Garland is a fine man in every way. His character is impeccable. His record of public service is unsurpassed, and his time on the bench has been really very, very exemplary. All we're asking is for the Republicans to do their job. Now, Mitch McConnell set out, and he did it publicly. His number one goal was to make sure Obama was not reelected. He failed at that miserably. Just like he's going to fail miserably here. We are going to have a Supreme Court justice. It's the right thing to do. And McConnell leading his troops out, he's leading them over the cliff. And they're going to rue the day they fall him over the cliff.
So we stand with working men and women everywhere who have to do their job, who wouldn't be able to say, you know, there's a part of my job I don't like, I'm not going to do it for a year. Nobody else would be able to do that. But somehow, the folks across the street think it's okay for them to do that. So we're going to...
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says Daesh is responsible for genocide. In a statement to reporters on Thursday morning, Kerry said it is essential to stop the militant group, better known in the U.S. as Islamic State, from carrying out atrocities.
Daesh is responsible for genocide against groups.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry on Thursday declared that violence by Islamic State against religious minorities was genocide, saying the United States would do everything it could to hold the militant group accountable. "In my judgment, Daesh is responsible for genocide against groups under its control, including Yazidis, Christians, and Shia Muslims," Kerry said in a statement to reporters, using another term for Islamic State. Republicans who control the U.S. Congress have been pressuring the Democratic Obama administration to call the militants' atrocities in Iraq and Syria acts of genocide. This week, one chamber, the U.S. House of Representatives, passed a resolution labeling the group's violence against religious and ethnic minorities as genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. A U.S. administration has not made a genocide finding since 2004. It determined genocide had occurred in Darfur and that the government of Sudan was responsible.
Territory with an eye to the protection of minority communities. In particular, the liberation of Mosul, of Nineveh province in Iraq, and parts of Syria that are currently occupied by Daesh. We must recognize what Daesh is doing to its victims. We must hold the perpetrators accountable, and we must find the resources to help those harmed by these atrocities be able to survive on their ancestral land. Naming these crimes is important, but what is essential is to stop them.
Migrants brace up for another harsh night as they remain in limbo on Greece's border with Macedonia. Migrants prepare themselves to face another night along the Greek border. They are virtually stuck as European leaders met in Brussels for a two-day summit aiming to find ways to stem the influx. Here, seeking warmth, they find a settlement already battered by flooding rains, illnesses. A migrant from Pakistan says there are few options.
We don't know what we're going to do, but we are stuck here. We don't know what to do. We cannot go back. They're not open the border, so we have no idea what to do.
And then comes the night. It comes as the EU announces it has a common position to offer Turkey. It comes as Greece's Prime Minister is calling for help. So they pass the time as best they can with music, dance and hope. With US President Barack Obama's historic visit fast approaching, expectations on the island run high. High hopes in Cuba ahead of the historic visit of US President Barack Obama. Obama is set to touch down March 20, the first time a US president has visited the island since Fidel Castro's rebels overthrew a pro-American government in 1959. Hugo Guterres is expecting good things. He says it's very good. Very good. Maybe things change with his arrival. I do not know, for the better. At Havana's California Cafe, American Sean Baum, who is married to a Cuban, is hoping Obama will stop by.
I'm very excited that President Obama is coming. I'm a huge Obama supporter, and to me it's meant so much to have him as a president for us. And in fact, I actually wrote to the White House and I invited him to come and have a mojito with us while we're here.
In fact, I actually wrote to the White House and I invited him to come and have a mojito with us while we're here. Last year, the number of U.S. visitors to Cuba soared 77% in 2015. The hope is Obama will inspire even more American tourists. We'll take a short break here. EU leaders gather to tackle migrant crisis. Art fires caught on tape. More bloodshed on the West Bank. Clashes break out in Paris over labor reforms. And a bad choice of souvenir from North Korea. Welcome back to Millennium TV News. European leaders gather in Brussels for a summit to discuss a migrant deal with Turkey aimed at curbing the influx of migrants into Europe. The scramble for food at a migrant camp in Greece along the Macedonia border. A woman from Mosul, 9 months pregnant, likely to give birth in the camp, part of the backdrop as European leaders gather in Brussels, where they hope to craft a migrant deal with Turkey to help curb the migrant influx into Europe. Cautious optimism from German Chancellor Angela Merkel. She says, I believe it is possible and I am consciously cautious. I believe it is possible to find such a common position. Under a proposed plan, Turkey would take back all those, including Syrian refugees who crossed to Greek islands. The EU would also double an agreed €3 billion fund to help refugees in Turkey. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras says,
I'm waiting today to take a decision to assist Greece in these difficult circumstances.
Something needs to be done. I'm waiting today to take for a decision to assist Greece in these difficult circumstances, especially in our northern borders in Idomeni. As thousands linger in camps, the coming hours could be critical. Italy arrests 12 over $16.6 million Verona art theft in November. Italian police released video Wednesday showing closed-circuit TV footage of thieves carrying off millions of dollars of artwork from a museum in Verona. Now, 12 suspects have been arrested for stealing more than $60 million in artwork. The paintings, including works by Tintoretto and Rubens, were taken by armed robbers shortly before the Castelvechico Museum in Verona closed November 19, 2015. Theories over the culprits ranged from local delinquents to Islamic State. They tied up the museum cashier and forced an armed guard to hand over keys to his car, which they used to get away. Italian media reported that 9 of the suspects were Moldovans and 3 were Italians. 2 Palestinians are shot dead after stabbing and wounding an Israeli soldier. Another crime scene in the West Bank outside a Jewish settlement. 2 Palestinians stabbed and wounded an Israeli female soldier Thursday and were then shot and killed. The mayor of the settlement, Eliyahu Shaviro, is calling for action.
I call on the Prime Minister to act strongly in front of this wave of terror, the wild incitement, and the Palestinian Authority. I can also say that we will not be broken. We are strong.
Israeli forces have killed at least 187 Palestinians. Students clashed with police in Paris during a protest against proposed government labor reforms that the students say aren't inclusive enough. The clashes between student protesters and police came amid demonstrations over proposed labor reforms. The students are demanding a bigger say in the government's plans. In 80, the proposed reforms include changes to working hours, holidays and pay, and new rules that would make it easier for employers to hire and fire staff. The government says change is needed to help lower France's unemployment rate, which is stuck above 10%. But student union says that reforms threaten to compromise funds intended to help encourage hiring and help recent graduates find work.
Today, 80% of new hires are short-term contracts, so students will suffer the negative impact of this law.
Otto Warmbier was sentenced to 15 years hard labor in North Korea on Wednesday for stealing a political slogan from a hotel. But what did the slogan actually say, and how important is it in the eyes of the state? Media Reporters has the answers.
I beg that you see how I am only human. How I have made the worst mistake of my life. He's been condemned to 15 years hard labor for attempting to steal a piece of North Korean propaganda. But what exactly was the American student Otto Warmbier trying to get his hands on? On Wednesday, the hotel worker that caught him testified in court. He says Warmbier was trying to snatch a large banner with Kim Jong-il's name on it. And as Joo-min Park reports from Seoul, that was about the worst choice he could have made.
The slogan reads, "Let's arm ourselves strongly with Kim Jong-il's patriotism." In the ruling dynasty of the Kim family, doing damage to the leader Kim's family's pictures, statues or monuments is a serious crime, considered as a disgracing godlike figures. Kim Jong-un once said by himself, Kim Jong-il's patriotism is the crystallization of the socialist patriotism. In North Korea, which normally lacks electricity, they take special care of places around Kim's statues, provided with power, and they shed light on Kim's portrait all night.
CCTV shows Warmbier entering a restricted part of the hotel at around 2 a.m. on New Year's morning. The clothes he was wearing that night were analysed, and his fingerprints were also scanned and compared to those on the banner. It's unclear how long he'll ultimately be held by Pyongyang and exactly what he'll do for hard labour. But one thing's for sure, there are few places on earth that are less forgiving when it comes to definitions of crime against the state.
China is leading the fight against drug trafficking in Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle, lending and aid and weapons to nations along the Mekong River. As media reports, it's clear that despite Beijing's efforts, the drug trade is booming.
This is Asia's Golden Triangle, where the borders of Thailand, Laos and Myanmar meet. Behind the quiet river scenes and serene Buddhist temples, another story of rebel armies and patchy law enforcement and a narcotics empire worth billions of dollars.
I'm Andrew Marshall, reporting from northern Thailand. This is the Mekong River, which flows for thousands of miles through China and Southeast Asia. Its waters provide irrigation, food and transport for millions of people, but parts of it are remote and lawless, making it the perfect smuggling route for drugs and other contraband.
Travel down the Mekong River from China, and the challenges regional powers face in tackling the drug trade are all too clear. The heart of the problem, a lack of cooperation and resources. Here's what Laos is bringing to the fight. A patrol boat fast enough to give traffickers a run for their money. It was a gift from China, but on many days it sits idle for lack of gasoline. In Myanmar, the world's second largest opium producer, another patrol boat, also a gift from China. Some say the boats are Beijing's attempt to project its power deeper into mainland Southeast Asia. But China has other reasons to be generous. Much of Myanmar's opium ends up there as heroin. Then there's the piracy. 5 years ago, an infamous outlaw attacked these two Chinese cargo boats, killing 13 sailors. China answered the threats by sending patrols down the Mekong, far beyond its own borders. That scared off the pirates, but the drug traffickers are still doing a roaring trade. UN officials told me that patrols were simply not enough. Taking on the traffickers would require Mekong countries to cooperate and share intelligence like never before. Otherwise, like the river itself, the drugs will keep flowing.
Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu commemorates victims of Sunday's attack as Kurdish TAK militant group claims responsibility. Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu and his wife Sare Davutoglu visited a makeshift memorial at an Ankara bus stop on Thursday, where a suicide bomb attack was carried out on Sunday that killed 37 people. Davutoglu and his wife left red carnations and a Turkish flag at the site, pausing to pay for the victims. Their visit comes shortly after the Kurdistan Freedom Hawks, a militant group believed to be linked to the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, claimed responsibility for the deadly bombing and warned it would stage more attacks against those it hold responsible for security operations in the mainly Kurdish southeast. Greece played down on Wednesday a gaffe by its migration minister, who failed to use the full name of northern neighbor, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, and said his focus must remain on tackling an escalating migration crisis.
With thousands of migrants and refugees massing at the Greek-Macedonia border, relations between the two countries are fraught, and now they're entangled in a political spat. Greece on Wednesday playing down a gaffe by its migration minister, who failed to use the full name of its northern neighbour, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. The mass movement of people is flaming old tensions, says correspondent in Athens.
Relations between Greece and Macedonia have been fraught for decades over the name dispute. Greece has long refused to accept the name Macedonia because it says it worries it could lead to possible territorial claims by Macedonia on a northern Greek province of the same name. Now, in addition to that, the migration crisis has strained relations between the two countries. Macedonia lies on the now closed Balkan route for migrants to reach wealthier northern Europe, and it erected a fence several months ago on its border to stop inflow of migrants. Now, Greece has said this was a unilateral action, that it shouldn't have done so. And at the same time, Macedonia is blaming Greece of not doing enough to stem the flow, despite having received a lot of help and a lot of funds from the European Union.
There were calls for the minister to resign over the comments, but for now it seems his job is safe. The government saying the focus should remain on tackling migration without any dangerous distractions from the current crisis.
Syrian volunteers known as the White Helmets continue to risk their lives saving others inside their war-torn country. The search and rescue group say they have saved over 50,000 people.
Even amid a ceasefire, the threat from the sky remains. This is the aftermath of an airstrike in Aleppo, shot just a few days ago. For the people that haven't fled, there is no one to call when the bombs drop. That's where the White Helmets come in, made up of ordinary citizens, from bakers to teachers. They're the first to rush in when the shells hit. Many volunteers train across the border in Turkey and deploy all over the country. They've just reached their own tragic milestone, saving more than 50,000 of their own countrymen. We spoke to the director of the Syrian Civil Defence during a trip to London. He used to be an electrician.
We used to be called to an attack once a month that had 30 martyrs. But during the Russian intervention, we were called to many attacks, where the numbers of martyrs was more than 100 and the injured more than 200. Attacking vital centers that provide help to people on a regular basis and then attacking the people that rush to help.
Made up of nearly 3,000 volunteers, they say they're impartial and on the side of life. As the Syrian conflict enters its 6th year, more than 250,000 have been killed. And with huge parts of the country flattened, rescue workers say part of the difficulty lies in even finding a hospital to treat the wounded.
Difficulties are high. Sometimes when we are taking someone to the nearest hospital, we don't find spaces, so we need to go further to the next one. Sometimes they don't make it, and we can't get them to the hospital where they should be treated. The pain we feel is massive while rescuing people, while looking for a hospital, as most of the hospitals in the city have been completely destroyed.
Despite the dangers of the job, the team get requests to join from across the country. They say if the bombing ever stops, they plan to help people return home and rebuild Syria.
A standoff with Cyprus could yet scupper a summit in Brussels starting Thursday, hoping to end the EU's migrant crisis, according Media European Affairs.
For many migrants and refugees, the journey to Europe ends here, the border between Greece and Macedonia. European Union ministers have been calling for a solution to this crisis for months, On Friday, they had the chance to agree one. Frantic last-minute negotiations are underway to iron out problems with the proposal from Germany and Turkey. It's hoped the plan could end the trafficking of migrants from Turkey to Greece, but there are significant hurdles, including Cyprus, an unresolved issue since the Turkish invasion of 1974.
There are promising peace negotiations going on about reunification of Cyprus involving the present president of Cyprus and the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community. The question is, how can that be, as the Dutch foreign minister said, imaginatively, constructively articulated, the two things interconnected in a positive way instead of a negative dynamic which might result if somebody tries to force Cyprus's hand alone this week.
Angela Merkel's plan is a one-for-one swap deal to stop people entering the EU illegally. Europe would admit one Syrian refugee for each illegal migrant returned to Turkey. In return, Turkey gets money, visa-free travel in Europe and accelerated EU membership negotiations, if all agree.
The idea is that the Europeans will try and sort things out among themselves over dinner on Thursday evening, and then Friday morning they'll have breakfast with the Turkish Prime Minister. But as an EU official said, breakfast, we're ready to serve lunch if it takes that long as well.
Even if the swap deal is approved, the EU still has to agree quotas for sharing out Syrian refugees, something several EU members are not happy about.
Protests erupt in several Brazilian cities after President Dilma Rousseff named her predecessor chief of staff, shielding him from prosecution. The streets in Brazil are packed with protesters after President Dilma Rousseff named her predecessor, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, as her chief of staff. The country's opposition says the move is an attempt to shield Lula from prosecution. He was charged last week with money laundering and fraud. As chief of staff, he is immune from all but the Supreme Court. Protesters are calling for his arrest and for Rousseff to step down. This woman shouts that she is tired of so much corruption in the country. Rousseff is being blamed for Brazil's worst recession in a generation. She says Lula has been chosen for his experience and his history of championing sound economic policies and fighting inflation. Meeting resulted in reduced tension on the border and an exchange of prisoners, Saudi envoy to UN tells media. Two Houthi representatives attended sacred peace talks in Saudi Arabia, the kingdom's ambassador to the United Nations has said. Abdullah al-Mualimi told media on Thursday that the meeting resulted in a reduction of tensions on the border and an exchange of prisoners. We will continue to open our arms and our hearts to the possibility of dialogue with everybody, Mualimi told media upfront. His comments came as a spokesperson for the Saudi-led coalition announced that major combat operators were coming to an end. Hanada Al-Rifai tells media about being tortured, losing her brother, and her campaign to free political prisoners. A woman who says she was jailed in Syria for 7 months has revealed the extent of torture she and her brother, who was killed in prison, suffered at the hands of Bashar al-Assad's government, from being forced to eat from toilet pots and being interrogated in a room covered in vomit and blood, to being badly beaten for days on end and receiving constant death threats. Activist Hanada Al-Rifai said the treatment meted out to her was inhuman. I want to be a voice for the victims of this war, she told media. Speaking in Geneva, where the latest round of peace talks are being held, the conditions are very sadistic, very criminal. Rifai on Thursday appeared on a panel in the Swiss city at an exhibition of photographs smuggled out of Damascus by a former military photographer codenamed Caesar. Also speaking on the panel were other Syrian activists and Britain's special representative for Syria. Rifai was a teacher, but when the uprising began, she seized the opportunity to join peaceful protests. Washington and Seoul officials report missile launches amid heightening tensions on the Korean peninsula. North Korea has fired 2 medium-range ballistic missiles into the sea, U.S. and South Korean officials have said. South Korea's military said the first missile was launched from Sukchon in the country's southwest at 5:55 a.m. on Friday and flew 800 kilometers before crashing off into the East Sea, also known as Sea of Japan. Second, fired about 20 minutes later, disappeared off radar early into its flight. Both missiles are believed to be medium-range Rodong missiles fired from road mobile launch vehicles. We'll take Democratic Union Party and allied groups approved document that declares federal democratic system in country's north. Syrian Kurdish Democratic Union Party and several allied groups have voted to create an autonomous federation in the northern part of Syria. BYD officials claimed autonomy for the Kurdish-controlled areas on Thursday after 2 days of meetings with delegates of different communities in the region. Representatives of the Kurdish, Arab, Azerian communities and other ethnic groups met in the town of MILLENNIUM in Hasakah province to discuss bringing 3 Kurdish-led autonomous areas under the umbrella of a federal system. Taj Kurdish, a spokesman for the Syrian Democratic Forces, one of the groups involved, told the media that the move had been made after many attempts by the Kurds to be heard. The Kurdish people have been rejected and silenced in the latest peace talks in Geneva, he said. We feel that the world powers are using us as a tool to push forward with their agendas. It is now our right to protect ourselves. We do not support dividing Syria, but we expect an equal and fair outcome from the peace talks, and we have not seen any. The YPG, Jaish al-Tuhar and other Kurdish groups are all part of the SDF, a coalition that was founded in Syria's northeastern region in October. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on Thursday said the conspiracy of the anti-liberation forces is still on, but they cannot confuse the people like the previous time. The anti-liberation forces are still hatching conspiracy against Bangladesh, but that conspiracy has now failed to confuse the people, she said. The Prime Minister said this while addressing a children's rally marking the 96th birth anniversary of Father of the Nation and National Children's Day on the Bangabandhu Mausoleum premises here today. Ministry of Women and Children Affairs and Gopalganj District Administration jointly organized the rally, participated by students of different educational institutions of Tungipara, birthplace of Bangabandhu. Rafiatul Zaman, student of a local school, presided over the function, while State Minister for Children and Women Affairs Mayor Afroz Chumki was present as special guest. Ministers, Parliament members, Cabinet Secretary, chiefs of the 3 services, political leaders, senior civil and military officials were present. The Prime Minister said the country is advancing towards the development, getting free from the curse gradually as the trial and punishment of the war criminals are going on. Trial is going on against those who opposed the liberation, collaborated with the Pakistani occupational forces, and committed war crimes. Due to their trial, Bangladesh is now gradually getting rid of the curse and advancing towards development. She added, talking about the killings of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, his family members and 4 national leaders in jail, the Prime Minister said through these killings, attempt was made to divert the country into another direction from the spirit of the liberation war. People of the country were deprived to know the real history of our victory. They were deprived to know that there is something for us for which we could be proud of, said Sheikh Hasina. She also said that everything had been done to spoil the spirit of the liberation war. Later, the Prime Minister distributed prizes among the winners of various literature and cultural competitions arranged by the district administration marking the 96th birth anniversary of Bangabandhu. Now the businesses news. TransCanada Corp, the company behind the controversial Keystone KL oil pipeline, said on Thursday it will buy Columbia Pipeline Group for $10.2 billion, creating one of North America's largest regulated natural gas transmission businesses. The deal, valued at $13 billion, including debt coming months after U.S. President Barack Obama blocked the cross-border Keystone XL crude pipeline. His decision was a victory for environmentalists and a blow to TransCanada after a 7-year battle for approval. TransCanada will offer $25.50 per share in cash for each Columbia Pipeline share, an 8.5% premium to the stock's Thursday close. Columbia Pipeline shares were at $24.75 in extended trading, while TransCanada's U.S.-listed shares were down nearly 4% at $36.50. After bad publicity hurt attendance, Park says it will stop breeding orca whales and making them perform tricks. SeaWorld has said it will immediately stop breeding killer whales, also known as orcas, essentially phasing out the iconic animals from its theme parks in the United States after years of public pressure. Attendance at SeaWorld, a top tourist destination, dropped after the 2013 release of a documentary, Blackfish, which was highly critical of the orca program. SeaWorld reported a fourth-quarter loss of $11 million in February. The company on Thursday appeared to acknowledge that the criticism had helped drive the decision to end the breeding program. It also announced it would stop using the orcas in theatrical shows in the parks, instead introducing new inspiring natural orca encounters. Now the science, technology and environment news. As Indonesia's capital struggles with a mounting trash problem, one local man is taking matters into his own hands by recycling plastic waste into fuel for his scooter. Rubbish is a serious problem for Indonesia's capital. This landfill site on Jakarta's outskirts struggles to cope with over 6,000 tons of waste it receives daily. The mountains of trash pose environmental and health risks, and some frustrated residents are taking matters into their own hands. Hamidi, a young entrepreneur, is turning waste plastic into fuel. He says, "Plastic originates from crude oil. What I'm doing here is reversing the process of plastic to its origin, which makes it become an energy that can support petroleum or fossil energy." Hamidi says,
Sampah plastik yang akhirnya
he can recycle 25 kg of waste a day by burning plastic and distilling the resulting vapor into liquid fuel. So far, he only uses it to fuel his own scooter, but wants help to increase production. He says,
bumi, ya kan, dari minyak bumi.
"At the very beginning, I just wanted to start a business and produce fuel through a raw material that is easy to get. But throughout the process, I learned about the increasing trash problem in the environment. Then I thought that this is a problem that needs to be resolved. Since all my previous experiments were successful, I decided to seek funding aid from the local government. At this waste treatment facility, there are schemes in place to turn organic waste into fertilizer and recycled plastic. But it's a small step to dealing with a bigger problem. Greater Jakarta's 10 million residents generate enough rubbish to fill several football fields every day. But NGOs are now stepping in to manage waste and calling on local governments to help fund projects like Hamidi's. Researchers have successfully used stem cells to treat cats with a debilitating mouth disease. The findings could translate into potential therapies for humans suffering from similar ailments.
The past 5 years of Smokey's life have been unbearable. Her owner recalls when her once playful and curious Katie's behavior changed.
Of 2011, I noticed that she started hiding and she wasn't as social, and then I noticed that her mouth was giving her problems.
A trip to the vet confirmed that Smokey had FCGS, a painful inflammatory mouth disease.
Chronic stomatitis is a common disease in the cat. It's very debilitating. Those cats are in great pain. And it's a very enigmatic disease because nobody has been able to reproduce it in experimental cats.
That's important because without being able to reproduce the disease in clinic, researchers have no idea what causes the disease or how to effectively treat it. Cats with FCGS usually have all their teeth removed, clearing up the inflammation in some but not all cases. Smokey wasn't lucky. Her teeth were extracted, but the disease persisted. That's when she was enrolled in a clinical trial at UC Davis. Researchers used cultured stem cells derived from their feline patients in the hopes of reducing inflammation and promoting tissue generation.
I would say that most of our cats, if I have to give a number, 60 to 70%, have responded favorably to the treatment, either by complete resolution or substantial clinical improvement without complete resolution at 6 months.
Baby girl! Good girl!
The researchers say these trials are shedding light on these types of inflammatory diseases, and that could potentially have significant implications for humans.
There are 2 other species that can get chronic inflammation of the mouth. The first one is the dog, and then obviously we would like to look at the treatment of dogs as well. But then, even more importantly, humans also get inflammation of their oral cavity.
There are plans for human trials using stem cell therapy to treat inflammatory mouth disease as early as next year. As for Smokey, she's cured, but may need a diet. Her owner doesn't think so.
No, she has been through enough. Whatever she wants, she can have.
The most detailed look at Pluto's surface to date has revealed an unexpected range of mountains, glacial flows, smooth plains, and other landscapes, according to studies released on Thursday. The unprecedented window into the so-called dwarf planet, which orbits the Sun like other planets but is smaller, comes via high-resolution photographs from NASA's New Horizons spacecraft. The Interplanetary Space Probe made the first ever visit to Pluto and its 5 moons last July. Those images, chemical analysis, and other data show a complex, geologically active world 3 billion miles from Earth, with an underground ocean and volcanoes that appear to spew ice. 5 research papers published in this week's Science journal said, "It's a pretty wild place geologically," said planetary scientist William McKinnon of Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. Another scientist described the diversity as landscapes as astonishing. Welcome back to Millennium TV News. Southern African governments and donors must respond swiftly to the regional drought emergency triggered by El Nino, aid agencies said on Thursday, with millions in the region facing hunger. Responding to a statement on Wednesday by the Southern African Development Community declaring a regional disaster, Oxfam, Save the Children and CARE said some 28 to 30 million people face severe hunger, a figure that could rise quickly to 49 million if no action is taken. Especially concerned about the impacts of the crisis on women and girls, said Emma Naylor, Gogi of the humanitarian group CARE. Increasingly, families are skipping meals and eating wild fruits to get by. The agencies urged governments and donors to coordinate their responses to the drought prompted by the powerful El Nino phenomenon, which was driven to consecutive bad harvests and the failure of life-supporting crops. The drought has hit much of the region, including the maize belt in South Africa, the continent's most advanced economy and the top producer in the staple grain. Investing in a robust response was essential months ago and it is critical now, said Alan Paul of Save the Children's Eastern Southern Africa region. Even though the powerful El Nino weather phenomenon blamed for the drought is forecast to dissipate in the coming months, its impact on people in affected countries will last far longer, the United Nations has warned. Now the entertainment news. UN envoy and actress Angelina Jolie visits a migrant camp on the Greek island of Lesbos, telling reporters on her way that I don't think anything is going to be over soon. Actress and humanitarian activist Angelina Jolie visited migrants in the Greek island of Lesbos on Thursday. Jolie, visiting the island in her capacity as the special envoy of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, has been quick to pressure international governments to take decisive action on the migrant issue. Asked by a reporter if she thought the borders would open up soon, Jolie replied saying, I don't think anything is going to be over soon. Tens of thousands fleeing violent conflict from the Middle East have died trying to reach Europe in search of a better future, many of whom drown in the Mediterranean.
Thank you very much. Love you, Jolina. Love you.
A rare blue diamond ring belonging to the late Shirley Temple, one of Hollywood's most famous child actors, is going up for auction starting at $25 million, auctioneer Sotheby's said Thursday. The 9.4-carat fancy deep blue diamond ring was purchased by Temple's father for $7,210 in 1940, around the time of the actress's 12th birthday, Sotheby's said. The ring will be auctioned on April 19 as part of Sotheby's magnificent jewel sale and is estimated to be valued between $25 million and $35 million. Temple won legions of fans as a bouncy, curly-haired young star in 1930s movies such as Bright Eyes, Haiti, and Curly Top. The child actress went on to forge a second career as Ambassador Shirley Temple Black and died at the age of 85 in 2014. Her family previously auctioned off a selection of Temple's costumes, scripts, and a dress she wore at the 1935 Oscars. Gabriella Copperthwaite was a mom who took her twin sons to SeaWorld before the death of a killer whale trainer prompted her to make her 2013 documentary Blackfish.
SeaWorld says it will stop breeding killer whales. The company says the 29 orcas currently at its parks or on loan to third parties will be the last. SeaWorld's announcement is a small victory for animal rights activists who have been pressuring the company to end its public exhibition of killer whales altogether. And California regulators had previously said they would bar SeaWorld San Diego from continuing to breed killer whales, or orcas, if it went ahead with a planned expansion of their artificial habitat. The company's first killer whale was born in a SeaWorld park in 1985. Since then, 30 have been born in the parks, including the first ever birth through artificial insemination. But in the face of growing protests, SeaWorld is now acting to repair criticism over its treatment of marine mammals and dwindling attendances.
Apparent discovery in King Tut tomb could shine light on mystery that has fired the imagination of archaeologists for years. Scans of King Tut's tomb appear to have revealed two hidden rooms, a discovery that heightened speculation. The chambers contained the remains of the elusive Queen Nefertiti. Egypt's antiquities minister Mahmoud Al-Demati said on Thursday that analysts by a Japanese team showed rooms that would be scanned again at the end of the month to get a better idea of what may be inside. The discovery could shine new light on one of ancient Egypt's most turbulent aims, and that at least one prominent researcher has theorized that the remains of Nefertiti may indeed be there. El-Damati said he thought the chambers could contain the tomb of a member of Tutankhamun's family, but would not speculate on Nefertiti. The whereabouts of those tombs is a mystery that has fired the imaginations of archaeologists and history buffs for decades. Now the sports news. Jason Day crowned a brilliant back nine with an eagle at the 16th to seize a one-stroke lead with a 6 under par 66 in Thursday's opening round of the Arnold Palmer Invitational in Orlando, Florida. The Australian world number 3 powered a 6-iron from 197 yards away to 10 feet and rolled in the putt for an eagle 3 on the par 5, posting a 5 under 31 on the back nine on a warm, sunny day at Bay Hill. The blazing finish by the reigning PGA Championship winner vaulted him ahead of an impressive group at 5 under that included compatriots Adam Scott and Mark Leishman, Sweden's Henrik Stenson, and Americans Brendan Steele and Troy Marriott. I drove it on a string and played the par 5s in par 5 under, said the long-hitting Day. It was one of those days where everything kind of went well, added the Australian, who at the par 4 15th punched a 150-yard shot under a tree branch that ran between greenside bunkers to finish pin high for his birdie putt. 5 times major winner and South Korean pioneer Park Se-ri said on Thursday she would be calling time on her glittering career at the end of the season. The 38-year-old made the announcement after completing her first round at JTBC Founders Cup in Phoenix, Arizona. I decided a couple of years ago I just feel like time, Park told reporters. I'm trying to say thanks to everybody. I'm going to miss everything. Park, who shot an opening round 3 under par 69 on Thursday, has won 25 times on the LPGA Tour and was inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame in 2007. Thursday's leaderboard at Wildfire Golf Club was something of a tribute to her trailblazing career as her compatriot Lee Mai-hong shot a course record 10 under 62 to lead by 1 stroke from another South Korean Kim Sing-yong. American Brittany Long also shot a flawless 63 to share second place. Lee started her round on the back 9 and was 9 under through 9 holes, prompting thoughts that she might get under the 60 mark. Let's have a look at Millennium TV News recap. Awaiting a letter from Obama in Cuba. Merrick Garland is a fine man, says Sandrine. Kerry says Islamic State's atrocities genocide. Racing for the night on the Greek border. High hopes in Havana ahead of Obama visit. You're up to date with our top stories so far here on Millennium TV, and don't forget to log into www.millenniumtv.net. Thank you for staying with us. Allah Hafiz.